Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, Prime Minister Netanyahu says the end of the war in Gaza is in sight and reiterates Israel's goals, eliminating Hamas and the return of the hostages. Plus, crackdown in Iran. Over 700 political activists and religious minorities executed. And approaching the 20th anniversary of the Disengagement. 9,000 Israelis uprooted from Jewish communities in Gaza and northern Samaria. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. In a series of public speeches, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a clear message. Israel will defeat Hamas and free the hostages. He also criticized the media for false coverage of the war. Here's the latest on these and other stories. Netanyahu says there are 5 principles for the next phase of the war.
1, Hamas disarmed. 2nd, all hostages freed. 3rd, Gaza demilitarized. 4th, Israel has overriding security control. And 5, non-Israeli peaceful civilian administration. By that I mean a civilian administration that doesn't educate its children for terror, doesn't pay terrorists, and doesn't launch terrorist attacks against Israel.
He pushed back on claims Israel has created a humanitarian crisis.
Contrary to false claims, our policy throughout the war has been to prevent a humanitarian crisis, while Hamas's policy has been to create it. Since the beginning of the war, Israel has let in close to 2 million tons of aid. I know of no other army that has enabled such aid to go to the civilian population in enemy territory. Now, if we had a starvation policy, no one in Gaza would have survived after 2 years of war. But our policy has been the exact opposite.
He also slammed the international media for recently publishing photos of young Gazan children who were portrayed as starving, but who had pre-existing medical conditions.
But this is outrageous. These are the 3 most celebrated photos, and they're all fake. It's the kind of malignant lies that were leveled at the Jewish people in the Middle Ages we won't suffer. We won't allow it to go unchallenged. I hope that you open your eyes to a simple fact. Hamas lies.
U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee also took to X and criticized CBS for selectively editing a recent interview. He asked, "Ever wonder how the media edits an interview to give you a different story than the one they had?" Huckabee posted his full unedited transcript, and critics pointed out that CBS cut out key answers, like widespread media reports that 27 people were killed at a Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aid site, but that never happened, and the media didn't correct it.
With Israel's planned takeover of Gaza City, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the war is nearing its end.
Especially in these days of great victories against those who came to destroy us, as we stand before the end of the campaign and work to defeat the remainder of the Iranian Axis and free all of our captives.
With the support of President Trump, Netanyahu says he won't agree to any partial hostage deal. Trump believes more military pressure is needed to get Hamas to agree to anything. Meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham went on Meet the Press and says Hamas must be crushed.
Enough already. Destroy Hamas. Do to Hamas what we did to the Germans and the Japanese during World War II. Annihilate them and rebuild the Palestinian society like we did with Germany and Japan.
Israel is also dealing with international outrage over the killing of 5 journalists in an Israeli airstrike, including a prominent Al Jazeera reporter. The IDF says it has evidence he was a paid terrorist and cell leader, calling him a terrorist operating under the guise of a journalist. He's seen here taking a selfie with Hamas leaders.
Israel is stating that this was a journalist who has ties to Hamas, and we published those ties to Hamas back in October. So this is no new information for anyone. And more of the pictures and evidence that seems to be coming out shows that this journalist that had at least very strong connections to the main leaders of Hamas as well.
Meanwhile, more anti-Semitic attacks are taking place around the world. In Montreal, a Jewish-Canadian father was assaulted in front of his children. He was hospitalized and the suspect arrested. Israel President Isaac Herzog spoke with the father and said, "May you have a swift recovery in body and soul from this terrible ordeal. We are with you, and we are here for you. The whole Jewish people stands with you." In Jerusalem, Paul Petite, CBN News.
As more countries call for a Palestinian state and international bodies like the UN and the International Criminal Court take an anti-Israel stance, Israeli leaders are having to stand their ground. Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs Sharon Haskell took to social media recently to remind the world that Israel is not giving up land or going anywhere.
So unfortunately, our history is full of disappointment from different entities who chose to back the Arab interest instead of the Jewish interest and to turn their back on the only Jewish state in the world. It's not the first time, but in all the wars of Israel, and if you look back, we were still able to defeat our enemy. At the end of the day, the truth is beside us. We are fighting a Nazi death cult. It is spreading propaganda and using, whether it's social media and mainstream media, as one of the tools to put pressure on Israel to surrender to them, whether it's international institutions like the United Nations and the international legal institutions as well, to try and push Israel and to tie its hands in a defense war that we have conducted against Hamas.
A brutal crackdown is taking place inside Iran, including mass executions and political arrest. This time it's not hidden. A former war crimes prosecutor is sounding the alarm to warn the world of an unfolding massacre happening in plain sight. CBN's George Thomas has the details.
Stephen Rapp, former U.S. ambassador at large in the Office of Global Criminal Justice, tells CBN News the Iranian regime isn't just cracking down with arrests or beatings, it's using executions to silence dissent, with the numbers rising fast after the recent war with Israel.
There are thousands of political prisoners, and they could charge them with these phony charges and begin mass executions, really judicial murders of peaceful opponents.
In 2023, Iran executed more than 850 people. A year later, that number jumped to 975. And now, just 8 months into 2025, over 700 executions have already been recorded.
The Islamic Republic continues to be the leading state sponsor of executions, second to the Chinese Communist Party.
Among those put to death, 3 Kurdish men and a top nuclear scientist accused of collaborating with Israel.
The regime fears its people more than a potential external attack because ultimately, in their perspective, they can absorb any attack on their military installations. However, if the discontent internally will to expand and lead to nationwide unrest, as it has in the past, it would really be the key catalyst for regime collapse.
Others sentenced to death are charged with vague offenses like, quote, enmity against God.
What I fear is instead of 1,000 a year, we could end up with literally tens of thousands being executed.
People are being rounded up all over the place. People are being stopped in the streets and told to hand over their cell phones while they check messaging history, photos taken, phone calls made, websites visited. I mean, it's just blanket across the board. Cars are being stopped and checked. Homes are being raided. No one is safe.
And it's not only political activists being targeted.
As the internal crackdowns expand and intensify, the religious minorities tend to be on the front lines of this repression apparatus.
Just last month, 21 Iranian Christians were arrested in these 6 cities. Officials accused them of spreading Zionist Christianity and, quote, acting against national security.
Those two things are the classic accusations for Christians when they get arrested and charged with something. Of course, the government just wants to stop the spread of Christianity in Iran, but this is amplified now because they are paranoid.
Days after the Israel-Iran ceasefire, the regime's state-run Fars news agency, which is tied to the Revolutionary Guard, openly called for a repeat of the 1988 massacre, when 30,000 political prisoners were secretly executed.
They got away with murder, mass murder in 1988. They think they can get away with it again.
As executions mount and repression deepens, human rights advocates warn the almost worldwide silence only enables the regime's growing brutality.
As long as the international community, the United States and Europe particularly, do not speak up against these heinous crimes, the regime therefore doesn't feel any obligation to scale back its internal repression.
George Thomas, CBN News.
The war in Gaza has been at the top of the news now for nearly 2 years. This week marks 20 years since Israel expelled nearly 9,000 Israelis from 21 thriving communities in Gaza and northern Samaria, in a move that was supposed to bring peace. But what happened since then tells a different story. In a few days, we'll bring you a special Jerusalem Dateline exploring more on this subject. But for now, here's a story from this upcoming show. Our Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl looks at the recent and ancient history of Gaza.
In 2005, Israel's Prime Minister Ariel Sharon uprooted 21 Jewish communities in the Gaza Strip and 4 in Samaria, or the northern West Bank, expelling 10,000 Israelis. Known as the Disengagement, it was supposed to bring peace. Since then, Hamas and other terror groups have launched tens of thousands of rockets from Gaza, carried out many suicide bombings, and dug numerous terror tunnels. The murder of nearly 1,200 Israelis in the October 7th cross-border attack is deemed the worst massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust. It's prompted many Israelis to call for a return to Gaza.
People actually don't know. Gaza is Jewish. Jews have lived in Gaza on and off for thousands of years.
Gaza is first mentioned in Genesis and later named as part of the inheritance given to the biblical tribe of Judah. Avi Abelo from the Pulse of Israel says even in the early 1900s, there were Jews living in Gaza.
Before Israel was established in the 1940s, there were Jewish communities in Gaza. Unfortunately, the British, because they didn't want to defend the Jews, they basically expelled them. They said, run away, because we were being killed by the pogroms by the Arab Muslims in the 1920s and the 1930s.
From the 1948 establishment of Israel until the 1967 Six-Day War, Gaza was under Egyptian control. Following Israel's victory, most of the 21 Jewish communities there were established in the 1970s and early 80s. The communities began to thrive. Over 30 years, agriculture grew to a $60 million per year industry, producing 15% of Israel's exported vegetables. Nicknamed the Celery Lady, Anita Tucker successfully farmed in her community of Netzer Chazani for decades. 10 years ago, she told CBN's Scott Ross about one of her first encounters with the Arabs there.
One day we see, like out of no place comes, like out from under the sand dune comes this Arab with his keffiyeh and his long galabiyah, his long Arab robe. We see they have bread and salt in their hands in the Muslim tradition. Bruchim habayim, welcome, they say to us. We're so glad that you're here.
Tucker says the local Arabs were happy for their success.
They were happy with that blessing because it was work for their people. We taught them modern agriculture.
She said the relationship started to break down when the world began talking about peace.
I say they misspelled it, and instead of writing P-E-A-C-E, somebody by mistake wrote P-I-E-C-E, and they started tearing us to pieces and tearing the Arabs living in Gaza to pieces.
Yair Shoshan was an 18-year-old resident of the community of Gadid in 2005.
We knew the minute we would leave the farms of Gush Katif, we knew we would pay a price. We knew it would cost us in missiles, in terror attacks, and shootings. In the end, here we are closing the circle.
The 9,000 residents of Gush Katif decided not to leave voluntarily. They felt they had settled the biblical land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with the blessing of the Israeli government. Until the end, they believed for a miracle.
It was the saddest thing that the soldiers participated in the disengagement. They evacuated us. They pulled us out. They took us out by force. And we thought it wouldn't happen. Until the last day, we were sure. The gardeners were taking care of the gardens. And until the last day, we were watering the grass, and we were certain it wouldn't happen.
After more than 30 years of nourishing successful communities, it took just a week to obliterate Jewish life on the sand dunes of Gaza.
I thought it was a terrible mistake to withdraw because it sends the wrong message to the enemy. that you are going back under pressure, that you are actually surrendering because you just don't want to fight.
Israeli Minister for Diaspora Affairs, Amichai Chikli, served in the IDF at the time.
I think that October 7 is a direct result of the disengagement. And I have one thing to say about it. We have betrayed the land of Israel in 2005, and the land did not forget and did not forgive. We should never abandon an inch of our soil in Judea and Samaria, Jerusalem, etc.
6 months before the disengagement, polls showed nearly 2/3 of Israelis supported it.
Many people who supported the disengagement on the villages nearby Gaza, they really thought that it will bring peace.
Chikli says it's a tough lesson to learn. A recent poll now shows that 76% of Israelis believe it was a mistake to pull out. In the eyes of their enemy, he says, every Jew in Israel is a settler who doesn't belong here, whether in Gush Katif or Tel Aviv.
They see it from a religious perspective. They see it as a Muslim territory.
President Trump said recently that Israel made a mistake in pulling out of Gaza. Abelo says it's time for Israel to return.
That test to see if they can have their own state blew up in everyone's faces. They want to destroy us. They cannot live there. We have to move back and live there and take it back again. Time to make Gaza Jewish again.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm here with Paul Petite. He's joining us here to talk about, to report on what's happening. And Paul and I go back many years.
Many.
You started with CBN in 1991.
Right.
And then you left in 97. We were working together in the newsroom.
Yeah, we were, you know, and so to be back together, it's almost surreal, really is.
Yeah, it's
Exciting.
really good. So you're here and you haven't been here. This is your first time.
First time.
What's your impressions?
You know, it's amazing. It's just to be in Jerusalem and just see it, and then look out and see the Mount of Olives, knowing that's where Jesus said and will return. You know, it's one thing to read about it, but when you come out here, as anybody that's been out here knows, when you see it, it just takes on a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And makes it real to you, and frankly emotional. I went to the Western Wall yesterday with my wife, and it was an emotional experience. I didn't anticipate that.
Yeah. What'd you feel?
Just a sense, a presence. You know, we always talk about it, but it was a real presence that I felt, and I was praying, and then obviously for everything that was going on, how God brought me here, and then of course. Just that God would guide Israel, and for His purposes, which we know He does.
Yeah,
and so it really was. But I didn't anticipate that. That was my prayer, and it was just me but God was there.
So you're obviously watching the news about what's happening here in Israel. Was there a perception you had before you came, and then when you came here on the ground, was there a change, a difference?
I didn't realize the extent of how much pressure that Netanyahu is under. I see he and Trump as very equivalent on the world stage. Despised in many ways, loved and adored in many ways. And I think being here and seeing how much pressure that is under, you don't, I think from afar, see how impactful that is, because you're getting bits and pieces, but when you're here and you're seeing how fast the news cycle moves, it literally is mind-blowing.
Yeah, doesn't it go almost 24/7 is quite the news cycle, and major things happen, not just little things.
When you look at a map, okay, and you have Israel, which is basically the size of New Jersey people say, in the context of things, and you realize that the entire world is focused on this country, it sort of puts in reality that it's God's focus too.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, it couldn't be any other way. Yeah. And when you see that, and you see the constant the anger coming from other countries, what they want to accomplish, what they want to do, God's got His eye here, because yet this tiny little state's protected.
Yeah. So coming here, what do you think your perception is? What do people say in the States need to know now that you've been here? You've been oriented about what's happening here. What do they need to know? Because they're kind of 6,000 miles away.
Well, for me, it's all about the media. I spent 15 years in mainstream media in the States, working for ABC affiliates, NBC affiliates, Fox affiliates. And my stepdad used to say when I was young, don't believe anything you read and only half of what you see. It is so true here.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I would say, a evil undercurrent to spin everything and demonize Israel and promote Hamas. And when you realize the type of people you cannot, and what drives them, it's sad to see your colleagues in the industry doing that. And then, and particularly the large news services, because it disseminates down. Yeah. And we're seeing that. And so my word is, hey, do your homework. Don't just believe anything and everything. Read up, learn up. Don't just see a post on social media, which has been brutal in many ways. But you know, within that all, Chris, as I see now, people are starting to learn. Yeah. People are starting to get, okay, time out. You know, what else is going on here? So that's important too. And so hopefully, what I would say to anybody back home is, you know, don't believe it all. Do your homework. Don't get on the bandwagon until you know what you know.
Paul, any final thoughts?
Pray for Israel. You hear that a lot, right? Yeah. But really pray, get in the trenches. And God's got a plan, there's no doubt about that. But getting to that point, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of hearts broken. We have hostages. Pray for them. Pray for the IDF. Most of all, just pray that truth wins out in the end. That's what I'm focused on, that the truth would win out. And that's God's truth.
Yeah, great thoughts. Appreciate you, Paul.
Always, yeah. Good to see you again,
man. Good to see you too. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. Please keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem and that God would thwart the plans of evil men. And as always, that the hostages would come home safely and soon. I'm Chris Mitchell. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.